Hi, Kim.
Cool.
Brian Spencer's already trash talking your mascot. Do you have any trash talk for Seattle?
Well, I actually just got off the phone with Timbers Joey, and I wanted to clarify his experience working in the woods. So I'll have you hear today that he is a legitimate lumberman. He has worked in the woods, and to quote him, he has cut, milled, and built things out of wood. So, and he did go to a school of forestry in high school. Took a school of forestry class. So I think he's legit.
Thank you for clearing that up. Looking ahead to this game, obviously a big rivalry game. It comes at a time where you guys are in a bit of a rough patch in terms of results. How big would it be to kind of get a result here and kind of rebound from this rough patch?
Yeah, this is one of these games that's bigger than 3 points, and I think when you look at the history of the two teams, oftentimes these games kind of propel, whichever team ends up winning out. The history is tight, and looking back on, I think it's 16 games since I've been here that we played Seattle, and the record is an even 7-7-2. And the home team has typically prevailed. We did win there in the playoffs, and then obviously in the Open Cup at Starfire, and then we both traded draws. Other than that, it's been the home team, and it's been very tight, and we're hoping obviously to change a little bit of the history, and win there for the first time in the regular season. But they've been tight games, and they do, I think, set the tone for the rest of the season in a lot of ways. Obviously, it's not the only time we'll play them, but because it's bigger than 3 points in terms of the magnitude and supporters and how they feel about it, our players how they feel about it, you want to get that result even more so, and it's the best medicine when you haven't won, is to get 3 points. And that's the mindset. That was the message today. We've got to put the last game behind us. There's not a whole lot to glean from that game, being down a man for 73 minutes, other than, try to avoid getting a red card. But, I'm not aware of many teams down a man, down a goal for 73 minutes winning that game. That's not a good formula. So it's one of those where you have to kind of put it aside and move on quickly. And that's the message. So we're going to hopefully be 11v11 for 90-plus minutes, and I'm confident if we are, we'll be in a position to win the game like we have most of the other games this year.
You guys won the 2015 MLS Cup. They won the 2016 MLS Cup. Does that at all intensify the rivalry, just having the two, a rivalry match, but also the two most recent MLS Cup winners going at each other?
Yeah, I think every season, every game intensifies it seems, if that's possible. But it seems that way. A lot of the same players who have been here over those 7 years. They have a group of guys on their team that have been here, for, the entire, 5 seasons that I've been here, and we do as well. So I think when you look back on the games and you remember those games and, the history and, what they've done and what we've done, I think it always just adds a little bit more, to the game. In saying that, we have to keep our emotions in check, because obviously last game, a big part of us not, being in a great spot to win the game early was, we didn't keep our composure. So that's very important. And it's important that we keep our calm right now as well. Last several games, we haven't been happy with the results, but ultimately we're still in a good spot. And we can't forget that, and you can't go back and get the last points back, but you certainly can continue to be in a good spot by getting the next result and focusing on that. So that has to be our mindset. Oftentimes the waters get turbulent around you when you're not getting results, and we've always done a really good job of locking onto the process, keeping calm, and focusing on the most important things, and that's preparation and playing well in this game, and that's what we'll do this week.
Caleb, if you see anything in Seattle in terms of, I don't want to say MLS Cup hangover, but just the process you went through last year of resetting and maybe going on something different after winning a championship, and maybe just talk about that process and the challenge of coming back off that.
Yeah, it's not easy, obviously. The best way I can describe it is, typically your players have, 10% less hunger, and the opponent has 10% more hunger to beat you. So that 20% in MLS is a pretty big swing, and that's probably, for the most part what's happened, because they've played well, they've got a good team, they've in most of the games dominated possession, and I think the teams that they've played have been pretty content to just sit back, not try to go toe-to-toe, not try to control the game against them, and in some of the games they haven't been able to break teams down and find enough goals. But they've shown their firepower in games. In that New England, look no further than that game, down 3-0, to come back and score 3 goals very late. Obviously, last game, they were able to find the goal, so they'll have some confidence from the last game. 3 games prior to that, obviously weren't good, but they'll have some confidence from the last game and feel good about finding that goal. And they're a good team, they have good players, and it's always difficult to play the champion as well. So as much as you might be more hungry to beat that team, they are the current champions, and they have that belief. And I think maybe for 90 minutes in some games it hasn't been there, but when you see them turn it up and turn it on when they want to or need to, they're very dangerous. They showed why they were champions last year.
Coming into this game, you mentioned the importance of putting a loss like last week's behind you. Is that something that's easier to do when you're coming into a rivalry game like this one? Put the past aside and just focus on this?
It doesn't hurt. I think that process rings a little bit more true, and it's easier to get them turned around quicker, because they know there's a huge game, massive game ahead. And like I said, I think it's more, if you get the result, the impact is greater in terms of lifting you.
Coach, you mentioned in responding to Jamie the intensity of these games against Seattle. Major League Soccer has scheduled 3 of them in 93 days, and then U.S. Soccer added a 4th in that span. In your opinion, what does that do, if anything, to the rivalry? You see on Twitter in response to the draw, there's a danger of diluting the intensity of these games.
Yeah, obviously they've chosen, it's not a draw to pair us with Seattle. They've chosen to pair us. And for me, I don't like the fact that they've chosen to do that, because for me, the pairings, I'm not sure why they need to be regional. I understand why they've done it, but I think in terms of setting a tournament up, I don't think it's the right way to set it up if you want it to be equal. Or if you do set it up where you're always going to play Seattle, which is what they've done in the past 3 years, you should be trading home and away, because we've somehow seemed to always get the away game. But we've obviously won there, so we know we can do it. But I think when you enter a tournament, you want it to be as fair as possible. I think that's the key. But as far as the rivalry, I think it's great playing them. We'll play Seattle whenever we'll play them. We have no problem playing Seattle, and I think it's great for the game. It's great for the league. It's great for the rivalry. They're exciting games to watch. They're exciting games to play in, to coach in, and this will be no different. I think it's a positive that we get to play them again.
Coach, you often talk about how you like the psychological aspect of coaching and you believe in it. To expand on that, do you believe in momentum? You guys started off red hot, positive results, then you hit this spot and suddenly it's going the other way, or is it just circumstances, or do you believe that momentum can exist between, from one game to the next?
Yeah, obviously, when you're winning, you're confident. Certainly momentum plays a factor in everything. But it doesn't mean that you're definitely going to win the game when you've won the last game. It doesn't mean you're definitely going to lose the next game because you lost the last one. And you look around the league, that's pretty typical. That's not the case. So I think when your team's in a good spot and you've been winning, you are happy because ultimately you've been winning and you have confidence, but also you're very mindful of the fact that complacency can creep in. When your team relaxes, oftentimes you don't play as well or as hungry as you should in the next game, and that's where teams get caught. And you see it around the league all the time because the margins are so thin. Like I said, a 10% drop in performance or 3 guys out of your 11 not playing well, that's oftentimes the difference. And so I think that's what you worry about when you are winning. When you haven't won, the hunger is going to be there. The tension, natural tension is going to be there. The fight and, the desire to want to make it right and, those type of things that you hope are there. Those are going to be there. But then you also wonder and you hope that the confidence is there as well. And that's key. But that's also why we keep our group very even-keeled, because I'm not a big believer in wanting to have a lot of peaks and valleys in your team. For every peak, there's a valley always. So our guys don't, really get too high or low, and that's always been a process I've preached, and that's why we've been pretty consistent overall throughout years. And, you never typically, when we're following a loss, worry about our group.
You touched on this a little bit, but in terms of the composure, mentality, it's obviously something that you emphasize a lot as a coach. In terms of the composure in last game, there was the span between the bad PK call and what ultimately led to the red card, where it did seem like the team didn't maintain the composure you would like. How do you make sure that going forward, even if there is a bad call or something like that, the team has the right mentality, right composure to go and do what they need to do to get the result?
Yeah, you're generalizing the team. I'm not sure that's the case. Obviously the red card's an individual, and, I think it was a bit unlucky they didn't get a foul called. There was some frustration there because it was a clear foul before the red card, and I think the frustration in that moment, with Chara crept in. And that happens sometimes individually with guys, are frustrated with situations and, PK call, and now we're down 1-0 and non-foul. And so I don't think it's a team thing, but we have to, as individuals and as a team, be aware of always managing our emotions. And, we have a fiery team, a fiery group, and that's good. But you have to be aware of that. Sometimes fire can do harm. You have to harness it.
And then looking towards this game without Chara in there, how does that change kind of the dynamic on the field, and maybe I assume that Olam might be coming in, but the role that you're going to expect out of your defensive midfielders, and maybe what Guzman will have to play as well?
Yeah, we have options, obviously. We played Darlington in the last game in center mid when we lost Chara, so that's an option. Lawrence is an option. Moby's an option. Change of system. So there's options. So those are things that we'll manage like we do every single week. We've been missing spokes in the wheel the last 4 or 5 weeks, so you just manage it. You just do it and deal with it. And we have depth. We have good depth, and whatever we choose to do will be based on opponent, form, tactics, all those things like we always manage. So nothing new.
Coach, taking a broader look at the rivalry with the Sounders, at this point, both teams have won an MLS Cup. Timbers got there first. That's something the fans are always going to hold on to, right? What's sort of the next first that the team should be looking for? What's the next step?
The next one, So right, that's what we can hang our hats on over your rival is to get the next one. Obviously they won the Open Cup, they won a Supporters Shield. We haven't won either one of those, so our goals are simple. We want to make the playoffs, but that's not going to be enough. We want to try to win trophies, and there's only a few ways you can win trophies. So, but there's no sense talking about winning trophies until you're in a position to do that. So our goals are the same every single year.
Coach, how's Darlington? He got obviously back in the game. You were able to get him off just because of the situation.
Yeah.
But how is he 100%? Where would you say he is physically?
Well, it's been nice to play him, left wing for, more than 17 minutes, So again, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we had a red card 17 minutes in, and, you have to remind your players, you have to remind supporters, you have to remind yourself sometimes, because that's a major factor in the game. It's obviously not good enough to not get 3 points. Regardless of that, we're not happy about it. But in terms of evaluation, in terms of correction, there's not a whole heck of a lot to evaluate when you're down a man and a goal 17 minutes in. It's as simple as that. So you throw the game away. Unfortunately.
Coach, you've been here for, you counted them, 16 versions of this rivalry. For 15 games, Siggy Schmidt was on the sideline, and he's obviously a very renowned coach in this league. How does this matchup change now that Brian Schmetzer, change for you personally, now that it's Brian Schmetzer you're matching up against, as opposed to somebody of Siggy Schmidt's stature?
Yeah, good question. I don't know that I really ever go into a game thinking too much about the other coach, other than what I see in their team. And as you get to know coaches around the league, the way that they put their teams together. You can see the trained behavior and, the philosophies, if you want to call it, of how they work in the good coaches and the good teams. You see clear things, system, style, and so, but it's not like I go into a game thinking too much about the other coach and how much I want to beat them, or I just want to win every game, and I want to prepare my team, and I pretty much stay focused on that. But we don't like the Sounders, but we have a lot of respect for their coach, their coaches, their players, just like we do all good clubs, but we definitely don't like them.
Coach Schmetzer has had to deal with a depleted back line this year, and he's been trying to get Will Bruin and Harry Shipp a lot of times, so his 11s haven't been very consistent. Do you feel like you have a good idea of what a Brian Schmetzer team is or brings into a game?
I think you start to learn it, yeah. There's some differences in obviously what they push and preach and than what, Siggy did. There's a lot of similarities too. They worked together a long time, so there's going to be some similarities, but there's definitely differences as well. It's definitely a Brian Schmetzer team and his stamps on that team. And ultimately, when you have a coach that puts his stamp on a team and you see it, I think it shows that he's commanding the group. They've been up and down this year. Obviously, like a lot of teams. You could say that we have as well. We have a few more points than them, but not much. And I think teams are still, when you look around the league, you have teams that were down that are up, and, teams that are up that were down. And, I think that's just the way the league rolls a little bit. Every team in the league has a lull. Every team. I've not, in the 5 years I've been in this league, seen any team in the league not have a lull in this league over the course of a 34-game season. It's just not like, the Premier League when you see, the top, 3-4 teams that just always run away with it, and they have very few losses, and it just doesn't happen in this league. Until this point, Toronto's the closest thing. Outside of that, I think it's pretty much, you know, a run and then a lull and then a run, and that's pretty much every team. I mean, the best example is the Philly Union. They've won 4 games in a row. That sums up this league. You know, they were the worst team in the league, and all the talk was about, you know, how bad they are and, you know, how people should get fired, and they've won 4 games in a row. So, good thing they kept their composure, that club.